Hi, I'm Dr. Boyce Watkins from Your Black World, and you know that one of the greatest problems in America today, right now, is the mass incarceration epidemic, largely driven by the war on drugs. A couple years ago, Russell Simmons and I created a campaign with celebrities and activists and scholars to try to get the president the rest of the Obama administration to address this issue, so you know how important it is to us. And I assume it's important to you, and it's also important to this country. And one person who is a great ally in this battle to help our people and to deal with the various issues in law enforcement is Mr. Ken Williams. Ken Williams was a Brockton police detective for 20 years, and he now helps lead the charge against issues like police brutality and things like that. And so I want to ask my brother Ken, how you doing today, man?
How you doing, Doctor? Thank you for having me tonight.
Oh, no problem, man. I'm glad you're here. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. And your company is called K Will Services and Associates. Is that your company?
KWillServices.com.
KWillServices.com. Okay, so people can should go check you out because you not protest. Sorry, you testify in a lot of expert witness wrongful death kinds of scenarios, which is huge in our community. So I think people should definitely go check out your platform. Now, I want to ask you this. You reached out and you told me that you had just joined an interesting organization that I think a lot of people should know about. Tell me about the organization.
Certainly, it's called LEAP, Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. And I joined the Speakers Bureau where there are about 150 of us, former law enforcement officers, some judges, prosecutors that have joined LEAP because, collectively we've looked at the war on drugs, and each of us, through our own experiences within law enforcement, have recognized that the war on drugs, prohibition laws, are actually what impact people negatively in society today, and that those are failed policies.
Failed policies, interesting. Well, okay, so it's funny that you use the word prohibition, because when a lot of people hear the word prohibition, they're thinking about the 1920s and what happened with alcohol and stuff like that. So what does the war on drugs have in common with the original prohibition that occurred in the 1920s?
Certainly, when you look at the original prohibition with alcohol prohibition, we saw a spike in violence in the cities because with alcohol being prohibited, you couldn't sell it across the county, you couldn't sell it or have it in bars. We became a dry nation. It fueled violence. That's how Al Capone was born, and he went out and became a mass murderer while he also made money on alcohol prohibition. So when we fast forward, when we look at 1937 or so, was around the time that the Marijuana Tax Act was passed. There was really no drug problem in the nation. I mean, we had certain number of people that may have experimented as casual users, a certain number of folks that even may have been hard users, but the numbers were relatively low. When we fast forward to 1965, it's around that time that the law started showing where roughly around 17,000 people were arrested for marijuana offenses in the country, possession offenses. When we compare that to from 1965 to present day, we're looking at roughly 20 million people since 1965 that have been locked up for nonviolent, simple possession offenses of marijuana alone. And that right there is outrageous when you think about it, because when we think about mass incarceration, and we're talking about the 13th Amendment, which talks about servitude, and the only way that you can have basically slavery in the country is through someone being convicted of a crime. Most of those 20 million folks that have been arrested since 1965, we already know a majority of them are black and brown folks.
Well, I agree with you. I think that's an interesting point that you make. And a lot of people think slavery has been abolished in the United States, but it actually has not. The fine print of the 13th Amendment, which from what I understand, Abraham Lincoln actually didn't want, like that was a compromise. That there were people who knew the loophole would be used the way it's been used since 1865. The loophole in the 13th Amendment is that if you're convicted of a felony, then you technically can be a slave. That slavery is illegal unless you've been labeled a felon. And what people don't understand is that that policies can create criminals. Policies can create opportunities to incarcerate people who might normally be considered law-abiding citizens, and that's an important divide to understand, because there are a lot of people who think that if you are incarcerated or if you're arrested for breaking the law, then you are a bad person. You deserve whatever you get, and if you didn't want to go to prison, you shouldn't have done what you did. Which most of us agree. You're a former law enforcement officer, so you understand. Most of us agree that we shouldn't do things that hurt people, and we shouldn't break the law. But the punishment has to fit the crime, and it seems that in the war on drugs, the punishment doesn't fit the crime. For example, there's a guy named Daryl Pageant I know who got 40 years, a 40-year sentence for possession of 1 gram of crack cocaine. And and people have to understand that that affects families. That people's when you're taking the breadwinners out of the households, you're destroying the futures of so many children, and ultimately the children end up in the same system as their parents. Let me ask you this: so what's been the reception of LEAP's work? What have you guys been? What have you guys tried to do, and how has it gone? And what's the reception been so far?
Well, I mean, LEAP is an interesting kind of organization because it reaches out to middle America. It goes into Rotary clubs and it talks to people that probably, don't have to deal with on an ordinary day the things that are going on in inner city neighborhoods. They may see it on the news. They may see the issues with respect to police brutality, but for the most part, in their neighborhoods, they're not faced with those same complications. So it's important for a person like myself to join LEAP and bring a black perspective to it, so that I can go and tell people who on an ordinary day may not understand what the situation is, what it is from a black perspective. So in the next few weeks, I'll be going out and I'll be making these presentations from my perspective as far as what I want to share with respect to the war on drugs. But one of the things that I don't believe a lot of folks understand from my perspective, that is that the war on drugs is basically a jobs bill. 1972 or 1971, when Nixon took over, when you look at the fact that we were in a slight recession back then, this whole thing about the war on drugs, war against black people, and when we look at it historically, this thing is all about hiring more judges, more police officers. The DEA was formed shortly afterwards. We built more prison complexes. We spent over $1.5 trillion in a problem that didn't exist before we started this war on drugs. So if we spent as a country $1.5 trillion since 1970, more than 40 years, and we haven't seen a decline in the number of people who are hardcore users. We haven't seen a decline, but we've seen a spike in violence in neighborhoods. And we haven't solved the education gap problem as far as trying to educate people about the problems of experimental drugs and stuff. Then I think that's a failed policy. The other issue, of course, is that when we look at the fact that the country used to evaluate a slave at $150 per head, we've basically taken a system, mass incarceration, and now we put a $50,000 bounty on each person arrested per year. So it was $150 per head per life for incarceration as a slave, and now we're using that same sort of process under the 13th Amendment to incarcerate 20 million people since 1965 for nonviolent offense.
Well, I think it's important that people like you are working on this issue because, people who are outside the system don't always understand the system. They don't understand how the incentives drive the system, and I think with you being a former officer, you're an important ally in that fight. What do you say to people who look at you and they say, you're working for the criminals? Why are you defending these thugs and these people out here that are hurting the communities? And because I go through that, when I speak about the incarceration issue, I hear people that say, why would you want to help a criminal? What do you respond to, or how do you respond to that when people ask you that?
Certainly, and that's a fair question. One of the things that I want people to consider is that I'm not for anyone using an illegal substance. I'm not for anyone drinking and driving. But at the same time, if we have someone that goes out and buys a pack of cigarettes, on the carton it says it can kill you. It can also, because of research, we know that secondhand smoke can also kill you. But we're not locking people up who smoke cigarettes. At the same time, if we have people who are out drinking and they become inebriated we help them out as best we can. If they get behind the wheel of a car and they start to drive and they commit, that type of crime where they can cause harm to themselves or, harm someone else, then we arrest them, and rightfully so. So I'm not taking a stance where I'm saying I'm soft on violent acts, violent criminals, they shouldn't be locked up. I'm merely saying that people who have a mental health problem where they, consume drugs, if they're not harming somebody else, they're harming themselves, we shouldn't be spending $50,000 per year incarcerating those people.
Okay, I want to apologize. My computer froze entirely, so that's why I was speaking in sign language for a minute. Um,
You want to start it over, Doc?
Nah, man, no. We don't have to do that. This is a great conversation, and people understand. In case you don't know, we're not a multi-trillion-dollar operation here. We just get the information to the people. So we are 100% substance, 1% flash, and the flashiest you're gonna get is that we're gonna both wear a tie sometimes. I want people to know that. But anyway, no, the information is what people are here for. The viewers on this channel, I think they understand that we're not a corporate outfit. We're not here to make money. We are here to share information and get people wealthy with knowledge. So I think that people should also think about the financial consequences of mass incarceration, because there was actually a study I saw that was published, I think, in the New York Times or something, that actually said that Rikers Island, for example, they spend more money incarcerating someone at Rikers Island in a year than it would cost to send them to an Ivy League university. So it seems that we would rather spend our money. We'll spend our money locking them up, but we won't spend our money lifting them up. It has gotten to that point, and it seems that money it's really gotten to the point where money is just driving everything. Money really is the ultimate incentive in all of this, because I think a lot of people really know that it's wrong. It's wrong to put someone in prison for 40 years for a minor offense, and it has just such a huge ripple effect in the community, a huge ripple effect in the life of the person that's been incarcerated. There are a lot of people whose entire lives have been ruined over a bag of weed. And it's not a matter of saying that it's okay to have a bag of weed. It's a matter of saying, what's the appropriate punishment? I always say, for example, when you talk about the effect on black people, I always say, well, if your goal in the war on drugs is to really just stop drug use and drug possession, why aren't you raiding college campuses on a Friday night? You don't do that. But you'll go in a black neighborhood and you'll send somebody's husband, father, son. I'm talking about mostly black men, because those are the most incarcerated group of human beings on the planet right now. And it seems that this is a system that is not only fundamentally problematic and corrupt and unproductive, but it also preys on the most vulnerable in our society. In terms of what you've seen as a cop, in terms of the racist ways in which the war on drugs and all these things have been applied, what have you seen? I mean, are we making things up? When there was a former DEA agent actually on a YouTube video who literally said that his superiors had told him that we raid in certain areas, but we don't raid in other areas, and that there was a racial divide there. Have you seen evidence of any of this in terms of just how this is applied?
Certainly, that would be my colleague Matthew Fogg, the former U.S. Marshal. He's also a speaker for LEAP. Now, it's absolutely true that we have two different types of policies with respect to the type of people that are being serviced. And, we understand that there's discrimination in this system. Discrimination and racism exists. It's existed since the very beginning, so it exists today. One of the things I want people to consider is this, and I look at it as an upstream and a downstream problem. If you and I were downstream and we had babies that were coming downstream, and every day we went to work, we pulled babies out of the river. We saved lives. At some point in time, the mindset has to be, why don't we just go upstream and try to fix the problem? Right now, upstream in the so-called war on drugs, the U.S. policy since 1970 is taking maybe a $2 billion problem of smuggling across the border with drugs and grown it to a from a $1 to $2 billion problem in 1970 or 60, and it's grown it to a $65 billion problem by Mexican cartels smuggling in marijuana, cocaine, and all these things across the border. If we went and said, okay, the policy has grown the value of something that didn't have the same value back in 1970. If we regulate it, if we manufacture it, regulate it, make sure that we treat people who, that 1% that will become hardcore users that's been flatlined since 1970, if we did that, we would find that education in itself would start to correct the problem. And let me give you an example. In the late 1990s, tobacco products, the tobacco industry was sued. It was a multi-million-dollar lawsuit where each of the states received benefit in money from the tobacco settlement. Immediately they went out, started broadcasting, using that money to educate the public about the risk of smoke, secondhand smoke, and we saw a dramatic decline since that time in the 1990s to present day, where a lot of folks don't smoke like they used to. So the same thing would happen with narcotics. We would see a dramatic decline. I mean, most people become addicted to a drug not because they're out buying something on a street corner, but they become addicted to a drug because of something that's in their medicine cabinet. Maybe something that was issued to them by a doctor, and it was a painkiller, and then they became addicted to the overprescription by a medical doctor. So, when we look at these types of problems, I think the issue becomes, again, when we get back to race. If we have more white people in this country, but we have less white people being locked up for committing the same offenses that black people are being locked up, 20 million people having been locked up since 1965, a majority of them are black and brown people, we have to inject the fact that this is a racial issue and that the war on drugs is a war on black people.
Well, I certainly agree with you. I think it's certainly a war on black people, and anybody who's watching, I encourage you to go look and see some of the things that we've done. If you go to yourblackworld.net/end mass incarceration, you can see the open letter that Russell Simmons and I sent over to President Barack Obama, and we got a lot of great support from a lot of people, from celebrities like Will Smith and Jamie Foxx to scholars like Michelle Alexander, Reverend Jesse Jackson, people like that. And it was really across the board effort to just kind of say, it's time to go ahead and move forward. It's time to stop this nonsense. Because we can't keep locking up the parents of our children. We have to create policies that make sense, because even those who support law and order realize that that these policies are failed and that they're doing more harm than good. And so I want to say thank you, man. I appreciate the fact that you're pursuing or becoming a part of this LEAP initiative. I think the country needs it. I think other LEAP members should be proud of what they're doing. And my dad was a cop for 25 years, so I have a lot of respect for good cops, and I like the idea of good cops helping to weed out the bad cops and helping to weed out the bad policies, and really doing what officers, good officers, want to do, which is to protect and serve. So this is the ultimate protection, ultimate service. So thank you very much, man. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Doctor.
Absolutely. And just so I want to ask you, your website, is it kwillservices.com?
Yes, it is.
Okay, I encourage people to go check out Mr. Williams' website. It's kwillservices.com. He's an expert witness in wrongful death testimony. Does LEAP have a website?
Yes, it's going to be www.leap.cc, and anyone can join as a member. It's open to the public to join as a member, but the speakers are people who are former law enforcement experience.
Okay, awesome. All right, well, please go check out the website, leap.cc. And everybody, once again, this is Mr. Ken Williams. He was a Brockton Police detective for 20 years. He's now leading the charge against mass incarceration, police brutality, etc. And I'm Dr. Boyce Watkins from Your Black World. And in case you don't know, we have a new film out called Resurrecting Black Wall Street, about the Black Wall Street Massacre back in 1921. And this is an interesting story as well that links to what we talked about today, because one of the reasons that the wealthy black members of the Tulsa community were able to have their wealth stolen and have so many people killed and no one prosecuted is partly because of corrupt law enforcement. Many of the individuals responsible for these murders and for this massacre and for the looting have been deputized and given the power of the state. So you have a Klan member with a badge and a gun, then you're going to have a real messy situation. That's what happened in 1921, and we want to dig up that story and talk about it again. So you can find out more about the film at resurrectingblackwallstreet.com. That's resurrectingblackwallstreet.com. And I'm Dr. Boyce Watkins, Mr. Ken Williams once again. again. Until we meet again, please stay strong, be blessed, and be educated. We are gone. Peace.